What is good, E7 fam? Pat here, back to talk about the June 8th balance adjustment preview. If you haven't already checked out, we already dropped the last piece Corinne first thoughts and initial impressions video earlier today. So yeah, would appreciate your thoughts and comments on that video as well. This balance adjustment preview that I'm going to be talking about today, I am very conflicted on. I think last month we had one of, if not the best balance patch of all time. I was in agreement with Tristan Wolf and Ace Trainer last week on the Epic 7 World's End talks that it was one of those amazing balance patches. It did a lot right. There was a lot of really good things, really positive things that came out of that balance adjustment preview. I did get roasted for some controversial takes on that actual podcast. I said things like, I think turn 2 is fine, or I think turn 2 is in a pretty good spot right now. And I've been roasted for that statement pretty much all week, either through Discord, DMs, or via random Twitch chats. So I don't always get it right, and I'm hoping that with this video, I am potentially wrong as well. Let's take a look at the actual characters and artifacts we're going to be talking about today. If you don't know how I do these balance adjustment previews, I take a look at the heroes and artifacts that are listed on your screen. And before I actually go to sit down and read them, I take a quick second to think about what would I change if I was going to change something on this character or artifact. So that way, when we talk about the actual changes, you can kind of see my frame of reference, where my thoughts are when I'm thinking about these specific characters, these specific artifacts, these specific changes. And from there, we'll compare and contrast and see how it goes. So in this video, we're going to be talking about Little Queen Charlotte, Spirit Ice Celine, Soul Bad Guy's husband, Jacko Valentine, which is really surprising to see a collab character here in an off collab moment, Summer Break Charlotte, Sharon, Arunka, Assassin Kartua, and then the artifacts will be Wings of Light and Shadow, Sword of Winter Shadow, and Iron Fan. So let's now quickly jump down here and take a look at Little Queen Charlotte. For Little Queen Charlotte, the two things that I would like to have seen are a combat readiness push on her S2, a Queen's Dignity when she is not critically hit, because currently she only gets a CR push if they crit her. Right now, people kind of go after her with like Hand Guy S2 or one of ROL skills. This would help with her turn cycling, I feel like, a little bit more. And it's something I really would like to have on the character, because right now, the only real viable ways to build her to get all the stats that she needs are dirt slow. So anything that could help her take turns in a timely fashion is super appreciated to me. The other, if you haven't guessed, is free stats. And what I mean by that is this character needs a lot of stats. We need a lot of defense. We need a lot of health. We need a lot of attack. We need a lot of critical hit damage. We need a lot of critical hit chance. And we might even need some effect resistance, so that way we don't get stripped or shut down or stunned or any of that stuff at the start. So this character needs a lot, because you're essentially trying to build a bruiser with Luna's stat line, and that's rough. So she needs something outside of her just survivability passive to really help her get there. Like, that's why I feel like people are really fed up with the state of LQC, is because she has a clearly defined role, and her skill S3 is pretty strong, but we just don't have the help we need to get to that first S3. And I'm all for counterplay. I think shutting down the LQC when any game she's in, shutting her down is a core component of it. It makes for an interesting gameplay experience. But more often than not, I feel like the LQC falls flat for most players, myself included. And I wish there was a little bit more to help shore this character up, because if you're a long-time watcher, you know I love this character. She's super fun to play. Until Lionheart Surmia came out, she was my favorite Moonlight 5-star in the entire game. So, the only thing that they changed is they upped the damage that the Will of the Mare, her S3, does to Dark Elemental heroes. And I don't know if that's enough, because this is not the CR push, clearly. But this might actually be the free stats. If they massively increase this damage multiplier so that it kills a Robbie on proof with way less than what we need now, kind of like how they lowered the ceiling on Straze's S3, that would be good. Because that means that we could realistically build this character. If I could build this character at like 1300 defense, 15 or 16 KHP at like 170 speed, and still reliably kill Apocalypse Ravi, right? I would actually consider that a win. Because right now, she needs something. She needs something to help take the burden off of the fact that she just needs too many stats. So we'll wait and see the multipliers. I think it's a good change. Is it enough? Who knows? If it's not, I would really hope that they come and revisit this character sometime in the next balance patch or two to kind of like finish the job. This, by the way, is how I would design balance changes going forward. These really small tweaks, and then constantly revisit them on a shorter time frame. I think that's the way you want to approach balance in this game, as opposed to just dumping everything and the kitchen sink on it like Last Rider Crow, which is why he's as good as he is right now. Next up is Spirit Ice Celine. This one actually terrifies me because a lot of people that I see in the community have these hot takes on how this character needs to be buffed and how they would fix her. And I think this character is a disaster in the making. I think she's incredibly niche right now. She's good for Guild War offense, and she's good for some really oddly specific RTA situations, like your opponent's trying to green Sid cleave you, and you have her on Storm Sword as a 5th pick, because then the game becomes basically unlosable at that point. That's where I think that this character should stay, because when this character, her play pattern, what she's supposed to do actually works, your opponent has no way to win the game. They just lose. And that is very dangerous when you have any character like that. If you watched the World's End talks from last week, I feel very similarly about Twisted Eidolon Charon. I think that if the S3 is too easy or reliable to get off, the character's probably too good, which is why I would not have built the character with that S3. I feel very similarly about Spirit Ice Celine. I don't think that you can make this character too good without making her broken. That said, the only two changes I think you can realistically make to this character are increased lifesteal on possession and the frequency at which Nimble Sword goes off, so that way people can complain less about RNG, which is honestly a big overarching topic that we'll be having in this video, is how we need to reduce variance, reduce RNG in the game if it's reasonable and within expectation. So, Mighty Strike is going to be 100% chance to activate Nimble Sword now, as long as you have possession, so that will get that out of the way. And then, surprise, surprise, possession's amount of absorbed health is increased. So it's exactly the two things that I talked about on this character. I think that this is the ceiling for this character, barring something like they introduce 7-star characters or some kind of massive power creep into the game. I think if you make her any better or make any changes aside from these two, I think the character just becomes absolutely ridiculous and a major problem in the game. So I'm glad that they recognize that they don't want to overbuff this character. I think they gave her exactly what she needed. And again, if this is still not good enough for you with Spirit Ice Celine, then I don't know what to tell you, because I think, again, anything more than this, the character becomes absolutely degenerate and becomes a new disaster style character. Next up is Jacko Valentine, who is a character I don't play in Guilty Gear, and I don't really play against her too often in Guilty Gear. And I feel pretty much the exact same way with how I feel about her in Epic 7. I know that she's essentially like a Remnant Violet that doesn't dodge, that requires some kind of debuff on her, and that's kind of it. So I don't really know what you can do with the character too much, but let's take a look at what she actually got. First up is going to be they changed her passive Trick or Treat, and I have very conflicting feelings about these changes. Previously, at the start of the battle, she would grant Chain of Chiron to an ally in the back row for 2 turns. Chain of Chiron is a unique buff that says after attacking has a 25% chance to stun the target for 1 turn. It also says after an ally attacks, when the target is stunned, increases the combat radius of all allies by 20%. So, that's what it used to do. Now, we've changed it so that after an ally attacks, when the target has any debuff, increases the combat radius of just Jacko by 30%. But they changed Chain of Chiron to have a random debuff between Stun, Unbuffable, Blind, and Restrict. So here's the conflict I have here, right? The way they changed Chain of Chiron is not super great from a design standpoint. As competitive players, we are trying to minimize variance. For a game that is marketing itself as competitive, the more RNG you bake into your game, the less likely people are to take it seriously as a competitive game. When you look at characters in Epic 7, I like to think of them as tools in a toolkit. You want tools that are reliable, that do the job consistently every single time. While 25% stun chance wasn't consistent, I knew I was picking Jacko if I wanted to enable a stun-based strategy. This random debuff here on Chain of Chiron is not really that. It's not good. If you look across the history of Epic 7, no random buff slash debuff character outside of like Solitaria of the Snow has ever really been good. And that's just because Solitaria is really good, even independent of the random buffs. You could, I guess, argue Clury on Justice for All back in the day, but again, Clury was just insane no matter what she was on, right? So I don't really see how this is good. I don't think that this is good design. That said, the other change to Trick or Treat is actually insane when you think about it. Any ally with Chain of Chiron that attacks somebody with one or more debuffs gives you a 30% combat readiness increase on Jacko. So that means we could technically build a dirt slow, all damage glass cannon Jacko, have her wait in the back, and then put our fastest character in the back slot, like a Pera, or even Conqueror Lilius, and just use our opening rotation anyway. And that's going to be enough to zoop Jacko to the front, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, right? You can literally press 4 honor on Conqueror Lilius, attack down everyone, S1 into a character of your choice. That will activate the CR push on Trick or Treat. So on one hand, random debuffs, really bad, not the greatest design, very messy, would avoid it on one hand. But then you look at that 30% CR push and you go, wow, this character is actually a hard carry for single target cleave. If we look at Forever Elysian Driver, which is the change to the S3, that increases combat readiness of all allies by 20% clause. That is now baked in to a kill shot on Forever Elysian Driver, which was already basically like a slightly worse version of Remnant Violet's Massacre. It did slightly less damage, I believe, than that move. We're increasing the damage. This character, you can basically build a really slow one, have your opener of choice debuff the target that you want to kill. That boosts Jacko to the front. And then you use Forever Elysian Driver, which again, it's like this potentially with this damage increase, this could be like a souped up version of Remnant Violet's S3. That could kill a lot of characters in one hit in this game. If this just outright chunks or kills a character instantly, you just get rid of them, then you just get a free sachet. Like, this is really good. Like, the changes to Jacko are like really, really good. This be damned. This is like the one thing that I hate about this change. But on paper, this character just seems like pair with opener of your choice. Like, it doesn't even really matter what you're pairing her with, right? Like, you could pick Pera, you could pick Ran, you could pick Conqueror Lilius. There's a number of these. Like, you could even do, like, if you wanted to, man, you could even do Solitaria. Like, the world is your oyster. This character is just cleaving, what we call with Edda. It's like Edda, right? Edda is what we call cleave in a can. You just need opener plus Edda. That's a win condition. Now you just need opener plus Jacko. That's a win condition. She's like a red single target Edda when you think about it. It's really, really strong. Again, though, I really, really do hate this random debuff chance. Next up is Summer Break Charlotte. This is another character that I have a big question mark on, because I went, I believe, on vacation after I dropped my first impressions for Summer Break Charlotte, and I came back and all of a sudden everyone was telling me she was bad. There's just a wall of negativity around the character, so I never really got around to exploring her, and I never really saw her, so I don't really know what to think about this character. My best guess is that Whale Hello there, her S3 doesn't do a whole heck of a lot of damage, and she's really reliant on characters like Lilius or Adventurer Raz to actually kind of pop off. But if you're somebody who actually played Summer Break Charlotte a lot, let me know down in the comments below what you think of these buffs, because this is something I'm definitely going to need to be relying on other people for. So the first one is going to be the change to Call a Big One. We now get 5% extra combat readiness on this thing, as opposed to the 20% we got before. Now it is 25%. Additionally, the S2 passive, An Adult's Responsibility, now gives 10% more critical hit chance. Still has that enhanced dual attack after every 4 ally turns. And you start the battle now with 60 Fighting Spirit, as well as the enhanced dual attack buff, which is very, very nice. What's not very nice, though, is we lost this clause that says at the start of the turn, when Fighting Spirit is full, consumes all Fighting Spirit, dispelling all debuffs before increasing attack for 2 turns and resetting skill cooldowns. We don't need the resetting skill cooldowns anymore because, as you can see, Well Hello There now uses 80 Fighting Spirit. It's very akin to something like Red Robbie's S3 Devil Drive. That said, we lost the cleanse at the start of the turn, and we lost the attack buff. And the attack buff is really, really big on any character. You're really going to need to pair this character now with an attack buffer because she actually lost it in her kit. That is a huge, huge bummer. And yes, Well Hello There now dispels all debuffs from the caster on use, but we can silence her now, we can stun her, we can sleep her, we can do all of these things to her that we couldn't before. So we basically have given this character way more weaknesses when she was already seeing no play whatsoever. We did increase the damage on Well Hello There by having 50% defense pen, as opposed to damage dealt increasing proportional to target's lost health. I think that's a good change. I think almost everything here is a good change, except this dispelling all debuffs after Fighting Spirit is full at the start of the turn, and increasing attack for 2 turns. I don't know if we really needed to get rid of this, because again, my worry was low damage. We might still have low damage after not having the attack buff, and then again, we just lost that dispel. The character's super easy to be controlled now. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. Again, this is another one where I'm puzzled. I don't know if this is actually going to help the character because we gave her way more weaknesses to offset the fact that we got a couple of nice changes on the character. Next up is Sharon. For Sharon, I have written that she needs to not get outclassed so badly by Death Dealer Ray. She's absolutely living in his shadow. And I understand he's a Moonlight 5-star hero, but it's not even close. Like, he is so much better than she is. It's unreal. On top of that, I think you need to change her skill 2 entirely. I think it is, just like I said with Jacko, it doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot, and it's filled with a bunch of random chance on the actual skill. I understand she's a Soul Weaver. They wanted her to kind of be like an offensive Soul Weaver that could still provide some level of support. But it's a win con, right? She's a win condition for the Venom-based team. Like, she needs to be all in on that plan. We can't have a fractured kit. We can't be going towards something else. It just doesn't make any sense. And lo and behold, Just Trust Me is still pretty much this like really awkward support skill with the changes. Now we get a 2-turn barrier as opposed to a 1-turn barrier. Sure, it's all right. It's not amazing, but it's all right, I guess. And now we have random buffs, right? The random buffs before were increased attack, increased crit chance, increased crit damage, and then continuous healing. Now it's increased attack, increased crit damage, increased speed, increased immunity, right? I don't think any of these really help, right? Attack is nice, sure, but think about who you are playing on your Venom teams, right? You're playing Death Dealer Ray. You're playing Solitaria of the Snow. You're playing Bellion. You're playing Sharon, right? None of these characters care about attack pretty much at all. None of these characters, except for maybe Bellion, care about critical hit damage at all. Increased speed is nice, but it's a 25% chance. And immunity, again, they don't care because characters like Death Dealer Ray usually are built with a bunch of bulk and ER, so they don't need this immunity. So this is just a complete swing and a miss. Again, we're trying to reduce variance and, make it clear what our characters are supposed to do in this game. And instead, we have this character who is a fractured identity between a win condition and a support, and the support portion of it is not reliable even in the slightest. So I think that this is a complete whip. That said, I don't think it is a total loss for Sharon because I think the change to the S3 May You Perish is actually pretty good. It now decreases buff durations by 2 turns as opposed to 1, which means it blows through most immunity granters in the entire game. So Last Rider Crow can't really protect you from the venom on this thing. Mediator Kowaric cannot preemptively react to this thing anymore, only reactively do it. So they can't just press S3, Nature Restoration. You will literally just press May You Perish, get rid of all the immunity, and just venom the entire team. So this is a good change. In fact, it might be a little bit too good if it wasn't for the fact that the S2 is just so middling and the S1 requires you to play a very long, pronounced game. I still think this character is living in Death Dealer Ray's shadow, but I do think that this change to May You Perish is a good change overall. Just really, please, rework this S2 entirely. Make it literally anything else. I would have loved it if it was like, maybe you keep the barrier clause, and instead of this random buff, there's a condition I can fulfill to give a random person on my team Pestilence. Because then, at least I know what kind of buff I'm getting, and it reinforces the game plan, right? Next up is Arunka, the character that everyone was collectively so excited for in a post-Hwa-Young nerfed world. And the only thing I have written here is 4 words, and I'm sure they're probably the same 4 words that you're all thinking, which is, where is the damage? This character, from everything I've seen, hits like an absolute wet noodle. Everyone was expecting Hwa-Young, or at least Opsig levels, to deal with barriers, right? And this character, at least from everything I've seen, just really hasn't been that. The one use case that a friend of mine really likes is the fact that a Thrashing in the Prairie does good enough base damage that it can just chunk out a dodge character even on a miss. So at least we had that going for us. She was at least a usable answer to dodge units. Not a great one, but a usable one, right? So the damage is the big thing that I'm looking for on this character. And what we got was only a change to the S3, a Thrashing, and the Prairie. And yes, the damage dealt was increased, but also it was decreased. Because as you can see, we lost the 2-turn attack buff at the start of a Thrashing in the Prairie to gain a resets cooldown on the skill if it secures a kill. On one hand, that's pretty cool because a Thrashing in the Prairie is actually a Thrashing in the Prairie. If she whoops you, then you are absolutely, she's going to take it all the way to the bank and just start just going in on you and killing you over and over and over again. That's a cool flavor win. Losing 2-turn attack buff, though, probably not worth it. That's going to be a massive damage loss. We did gain damage dealt against barriers increased in this move, but that needs to be a really high hurdle. Like how we talked about with Little Queen Charlotte, that needs to be a sky-high number to make up for a lot of things, right? If you take away 50% attack buff on a character that has one of the highest attack scores in the game, this damage multiplier better be absolutely massive on the barrier. You also took away the use case, like I talked about with my friend. You can't really use this character anymore to deal with dodge characters. We've taken away some utility, some use cases on the character. So this damage multiplier has to be sky high for this to actually pan out. Because if this doesn't just like murder a high health barrier character, then what was the point? What was the actual point? Why did we take away the attack buff? So again, we've reduced the scope of what the character is doing. And now that it has the reduced scope, it has to deliver. It has to be that Opsig level barrier punisher. Or this character, in my opinion, it's just not going to get there. But let me know what you think. I know Red usually watches a lot of my videos. Red is a Arunka enjoyer, an Arunka enthusiast. And I know he's got probably the most amount of games on Arunka out of everyone I've seen. So I'm very curious to know what his opinions actually are on Arunka. I'm sure he'll let me know down in the comments below after watching this video. Lastly, for characters, we have Assassin Kartua, better known as Fat Cat. And the only thing I have written here is that this character lacks impact. He doesn't really have a strong defined role. And what they did here, I think, is honestly give him just that. Instead of having bleed on his S1, which is just a random debuff because he scratches you, they gave him a provoke chance, which is actually really good and synergistic with his S2 passive Battle Frenzy. They've actually overhauled Battle Frenzy. Instead of giving a small evasion chance to all eyes of 15%, it now gives 20%, and then 50% itself to Assassin Kartua. And then obviously if he provokes you and you hit him and he dodges, then he's going to get combat readiness, and that's going to help make up for the fact that he only has 100 base speed. So this character has a pretty good game plan now, right? We stun and defense break a key target to pick it off. We basically helps us assassinate a specific target, and then we control the pace of the game while supporting our other dodge units. Very clearly defined role. I take Savior Auden, my opponent takes Zahak. I take Assassin Kartua now in the draft to reinforce that position. I now have 90% dodge chance, so I better hope you're on Symbol of Unity. So it's one of those things where it has a clearly defined role on the dodge team, right? It's a really, really good set of changes. Will it make him like meta? Probably not, but it definitely gives him a use case that he didn't really have, and I do like that a whole heck of a lot. Effectiveness imprint here now is the concentration. Also, again, synergizes now with this provoke, which honestly, looking on it, it probably could have been 100%. I mean, 100% provoke, again, it adds that consistency that we're looking for without actually breaking the bank, as opposed to something like Architect Leica, where it's a 100% chance to kill a character of your choice. I think that's slightly too far. I like it when there's consistency in my games, but not so consistent that the outcome is basically just like predetermined and it's not exciting or entertaining at all to watch or actually play. The last thing they changed on Assassin Kartua is the exclusive equipment number 1. It now gives him 20% extra evasion as opposed to 5, so that puts him at 70% dodge rate, more in line with what you'd expect from a thief, even though this character is a warrior. Overall, again, good set of changes, has a clearly defined role. Aside from Spirit Ice Celine, I think Assassin Kartua and Spirit Ice Celine, I think those are pretty much our two winners of the patch because they clearly have defined roles. Their changes are pretty good, and we know what we can actually expect out of them. Wrapping up the video, let's talk about artifact balance adjustments now. We'll start with the Illinab's artifact, which is Wings of Light and Shadow. This thing has to compare with Elber's Ritual Sword as well as Mature Sunglasses. Those are the two things played on Illinab and other damage-dealing knights. If this thing cannot compare to that, then it's pretty much a swing and a miss, and that's exactly how I feel about it. You now get the 20% damage boost not just on a single target attack, you'll now get it on AoEs. So it synergizes a bit better with Illinab. You're going to use the S3, and then your S2 is going to do 20% more damage on top of that. Just play Mature Sunglasses, or just play any other damage amp artifact. Elber's Ritual Sword is still going to end up being the best one because it has the random chance for the big blowout potential over the course of a game. But yeah, this really isn't it. This is a swing and a miss. It doesn't really improve the identity of this artifact. Even if you expand the range of scenarios like they said here to use it, it doesn't change the fact that the core effect on this artifact is not strong enough to compete with the other damage dealing knight artifacts that we have in the format. It would need to give like increased critical hit chance, and then also it would need to give us like something else, like some kind of damage reduction. It has to give us a bit more because we're comparing it to two honestly pretty insanely good artifacts. And I feel very similar about the next one we're going to talk about, which is Sword of Winter Shadow. This is Rand's artifact. It's fighting for the position with, RNL, aka Rand Never Loses, aka the 2311 special. And then we have, on top of that, Sword of Summer Twilight, which gives a ton of defense penetration. If you're on a real Rand, right? Sword of Summer Twilight can just win you the game outright with how much extra damage you're generating on it. Same thing with RNL. If you proc RNL, you're winning that game. So for Rand specifically, I don't think there's anything you could really do that would dethrone one of those options. What they changed here, instead of using a non-attack skill to remove 15 souls, it now removes 10 souls and gives you 10 souls, but the 10 souls you gain can only be triggered once per battle. It's kind of like a different version of Flan's artifact, if you look at it that way. That's a fine artifact, right? There's nothing wrong with this set of changes. I actually think this is a good artifact. But who's using it, right? Rand's not going to choose this over RNL. And on top of that, like somebody like Last Piece Corinne, who we just did the impressions video on, she could absolutely use Sword of Winter Shadow in her kit. It would help with the increased attack. She has a non-attack skill that she's opening with. She gets the souls, which are really good for soul burning. Her S1 soul burn is probably going to end up being really important for that character. That said, it's competing with the Symbol of Unity. It's competing with Wind Rider. So it has to offer me something, I think, a little bit more than that. And as a proactive way to remove souls from the enemy, 10 is not enough when you can stack Book. If Book was not stackable, right? If we could do Tagahells and only have one on the team, this would be a great proactive way of actually dealing with Tagahells Ancient Book. But because it's stackable, 10 is not enough for it to really minimize the impact against people that are abusing that strategy. Especially because I'm going to have to play a character like Ran and actually take a turn to do so against some of these really fast or high-end players. So yeah, on paper, this reads good, but I just don't know where you'd want to use it. I just don't know who can really take advantage of it outside of Last Piece Corinne right now in the current state of the game. And lastly, to end this video, we have the incredibly disappointing Iron Fan. Iron Fan needed to do something actually useful. It's one of the most dud 5-star artifacts we have ever had. That said, its only use is in Banshee 13 one-shots, where it is the best in slot option to tune that hunt. And you could probably guess why I'm bringing it up, because somebody who is recording a video right now has that same Banshee 13 one-shot that's going to get ruined by the change to Iron Fan. So what did I lose my entire hunt team for? After using an attack that targets all enemies except for a basic skill, increases the combat radius of the caster by 15 to 30%, can only be activated once per turn. Why? This is nothing. This is basically the Shuna EE that no one plays in artifact form. Why does it have the clause of except for a basic skill? Why can it only be activated once per turn? If I have like 3 or 4 batbacks on a Seaside Bologna, give me the turn. I deserve to take the turn. This provides no survivability. It provides no damage, no buffs, nothing. Like this does nothing. It's crazy how we went from an artifact that's this bad to an artifact like this that I don't even know where you could possibly use it. If there is a reason to use it somewhere, like, please let me know, because this thing has two restrictors on it, and then we have to use, actually technically you have to use an AoE. It has 3 restrictors on it, and the payout is essentially what Landy gets for pressing S1. That's insane that is what it ends up being. Maybe, I guess, if you use like full burst on Landy, you could use it as like a pusher, a CR pusher, right? I guess, maybe. I don't know. To me, right now, the way that I'm thinking about it, I think there's so many other better options, especially because this is a Ranger artifact, right? Ranger as a class is not really that good. The Rangers that are good are because of Guiding Light. Because I promise you, if Guiding Light was not a thing, Zeo would just literally dumpster the entire class. So when a Ranger artifact presents itself, and it's going to always be compared to Guiding Light because it's the only thing that keeps the Rangers actually viable and in the game. And the only one that I can see right now that is Bloodstone for the most part. This does not feel like it's it. Again, maybe there's some greedy Landy cleave that I'm not thinking about, but this does not feel like it. And again, I have to rebuild and retune an entire hunt one-shot team. Thank goodness I did not already do a Banshee 13 one-shot guide yet. Yeah, so this recall schedule for Iron Fan, absolutely best believe I'm going to recall all of it. Unless somebody can tell me otherwise, I'm absolutely going to recall it. Super disappointed with the Iron Fan. And overall, I'm pretty disappointed in this entire balance patch for the most part. There are a couple of shining lights here. Like I said, Spirit Ice Celine, Assassin Cartua, maybe Little Queen Charlotte. But if last month we had a clear goal in mind, and that goal was make turn 2 very good, make our knights very good, introduce more counterplay and silver bullets for the average PvP player for Lua, right? We had a clearly defined goal, it seemed like, in mind with that patch, and that's why it was praised so highly. I don't know what the goal is here in this patch at all. It feels very dartboardy, very scattershot. It's a lot of questionable changes, a lot of RNG being introduced or maintained throughout a lot of characters' kits, and a lot of buffs feel like they just didn't go far enough or they're too narrow and too safe. But again, those are my thoughts. As always, you can let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye now.